Hey, everybody. Good afternoon. Welcome to what is this? Our third panel of the day, and this could be a fun one. I get to talk with somebody whom I've known about for a while and briefly met at OAX in January, and so this will be the first time I get to talk with Bob Chapman as well. So I'm sure many of you have known of Bob or his publishing company. Maybe you've attended one of his parties and didn't even know he was the guy who was hosting it in San Diego. But let's bring Bob in here and learn a bit about the man. So, Bob, honestly, like when we got to meet at OAX, we didn't have a lot of opportunity to talk. I was pretty busy, and every time I saw you, you seemed to know almost everybody in the room, it felt like.
Yeah, after 40 years, I don't know if they feel sorry for you or I've become an intrusion or what, but it was fun. I mean, I said, we said hi briefly to each other, but you were the man of the hour, and of course, everybody wanted your time. So it was not the perfect scenario, but it was at least a start, and we had an opportunity to go to see OAX and what you're doing there, and definitely we plan on being back in January, so should be fun. But no, thank you for the opportunity to chat with you, and I'll let you take the lead here, and and grill me or do whatever you'd like here.
Well, are you not usually? You've had to have done a few panels in your day, right? At San Diego. I mean, with all the different products that you've released through Graphitti Designs, you've probably been on more panels than most living comic creators, I'd have to say.
No, I've been the most evasive person. I have not taken advantage of promotional opportunities in the last 40 years. I'm
Really?
not, I mean, I can remember I was at an IAD meeting centuries ago, and I did my first presentation in front of my peers. And again, I'm just not known for my public speaking,
Mm-hmm.
So yes, I haven't done a lot of things, and I haven't been the type of business I've been conducting the last few years. I haven't really gotten used to the whole video networking and streaming and stuff like that. So I'm a relative newbie to this, but no, I'm trying to be more vocal. I mean, we're real excited about the book, and I want to share it. We want to share it with people and see what people think about it, and and answer any question you or they may have here.
Well, I have questions, but I want to learn a little bit about you, and as introductions for everybody who's in the chat and who's going to be watching this video afterwards. Like you said, you haven't done a lot of these in 40 years of being in the business. But
No, you're lucky. You gotta break me here. You gotta
oh, good.
yeah.
So so why don't we start with Graphitti Designs, or maybe before that? Did you always know you wanted to have a career in publishing, one that involved working with creatives that in many cases are kind of on their own schedules and can be challenging sometimes to work with? And I mean, how did you get into this in the first place?
It was a fluke. No, this was not in my career plan. I'm not even sure if I had a career plan, but it definitely had nothing to do with comics. But it was just a happy accident on some level.
Mm-hmm.
My brother and I we were consumed with comics starting in the 60s. So we started way early on and collected comics, and then I grew out of them somewhat in the 70s, and towards the late 70s, my brother and I, we wanted to sell our comics, and we started farming our comics around to a few people, and what they were offering us was disrespectful, for lack of a better word, and so we decided. I had very little knowledge of fandom, and had never been to a comic book convention or anything like that, but was able to get a table at San Diego Comic-Con in 1980 to sell our comics. So my motives were not to further my career or anything. So we went there to sell our comics, and it was a memorable experience for two reasons. First of all, we were sitting, the table right next to us was Wally Wood. So, and I was aware of, I enjoyed his art from day one, but here he was next to us. Right next to us. And then we also had the opportunity to see the dealers and the fans fleece us because we didn't know shit. We had the bulk of the superhero comics from like 1960 on, because that's what we had gathered and bought off the newsstand. And all we wanted to do was get rid of them, but not get, not take a complete bath. And so, went to San Diego Con, had the dealer experience, and all of a sudden got to meet people like Jim Steranko and John Byrne and Wally Wood and stuff, and walked away kind of going, wow, this is kind of cool. Now I'm screwed because this was not in my game plan here. And at that time, I had a screen printing business, doing screen printing for businesses and little leagues and a lot of really, really boring entities. And so I was kind of looking for something. And so after San Diego in 1980, I approached him in 81 and said, hey, I would like to do shirts for the event, because comics and T-shirts and the graphics provided by comics for them to be on a shirt just made a lot of sense, and nobody was doing it. Yeah. So what do I know? So ended up, they said, yeah, you can do our shirt and you can sell the shirt. I mean, San Diego Con was a completely different show. It was a smaller event. It was more intimate. It was just a lot of sweet people and stuff. So they showed me the design that they wanted on the shirt, and it was a design by Dave Stevens of this jungle girl and her monkey. And keep in mind, in 1981, Dave had no presence in the comic industry. I was hoping for a great Batman design by Dick Giordano, Neil Adams, something like that, and they ended up giving me this Dave Stevens guy, which was very disappointing. But I had an opportunity to meet Dave. I was involved in San Diego, and the rest just kind of evolved because it was special. I mean, it really was. I mean, I was scarred, and little did I know I was going to have a life-changing experience by attending a Comic-Con, wanting just to dump my collection. So, it started there, and then from there on in, it was just the artists are magical creatures. They're it's a really great environment to be around them, and I learned a lot, especially from Dave. Dave ended up being a friend and an associate, and we were about the same age. He was a little younger, I believe, and we just evolved from there. I was doing T-shirts and then started doing different things, but a lot of what I did initially was with Dave being my influencer, for lack of a better word, doing pins and statues and prints and books and stuff. So it just evolved because there was an opening. There was the Wild West, and there was very little merchandise and very little cool stuff like that being put out there. And we had an opportunity to do it. The artists were, for some reason, they were willing to work with me, and I had a good relationship with them. And it's, there's nothing better than being a facilitator for the vision of an artist, until they get silly, then you got to slap them down or something. But, again, they're a good group of people. And, I couldn't think of a better way to spend the next 40 years, but it was so, I don't know if serendipitous is a plan, but a word, but it was just, I was making it up as I go, because I didn't have the background or the vision or the whatever to go in this direction. But it was just, I was inspired by the people that were around me, and it was a great group of people.
Well, that right place, right time. I mean, you just never know what's going to end up kind of pushing you in a direction that makes, that's the path for the rest of your career. But
yeah, no, it was never expected. I mean, and it was such a flop for me, but it's I can't think of a better way. I can't. It turned out great. It really, really did. And the comic industry was in a state of, there was a lot of people my age that were working together, and none of them knew what they were doing. And I say that in a good way. We all kind of evolved and grew together. We learned how to do the business of comics. We learned how to, we were all comic fans, so reading comics came back to not bite me in the ass, but it gave me a foundation that I could build on, because I wasn't comic ignorant. I had a lot of comic knowledge, and all of a sudden I was using it. And, that was extremely unexpected, but it is what it is. And I joke with people and say, I got away with it for 40 years. Nobody has ever come up to me and said, Bob, you don't know what the hell you're doing, do you? Because I had to say, no, I really don't. But
They're thinking, I don't know what the hell I'm doing, but everybody else seemed to, they felt you had the confidence that, you were totally in control of your future, but it never felt that way for you.
Yeah, I think I bluffed my way into a position, but I turned my bluffs into, oh shit, this means I got to do it now. This means I have to live up to what came out of my mouth. So either I have to be more careful with what I talk about, or I have to, step up to the plate and do it. And it was an interesting learning experience because I learned way more stuff than I ever imagined. And especially back then, before pre-computer days, it was, old-fashioned printing and typesetting and film and stuff like that. And it was a really great foundation to do that and to see the transition to where it is now with all this, the digital applications and stuff. So it was again, a very, very nice period to be going through this learning process or whatever it ended up being. I don't know how to label it. So somebody else is going to have to label it for me and put it on my tombstone or something,
Brian, he said, fake it till you make it, right? I mean, sometimes you just have to have confidence in what you're doing enough, at least to make everybody else feel that, you're doing the right thing. I've done that numerous times.
As long as I fool everybody else, yes, no, but again, that can bite you in the ass too. But no, it was the right place, the right time, with the right group of people. I mean, again, a more talented and inspiring group of people you couldn't ask for, and it's and good people. I mean, they're fun people, good to drink with, good to hang out with, and they're talented on top of it. And so it's like, okay.
The worst things you could be doing in life,
I mean, way worse. I mean, it's hard because how do you relate to the real world when you live in this almost a fantasy world with this group of people, regardless of the age? They're still your friends. You could have, normally you hang around with people your age and this and that. With comics, all of a sudden it's everything from somebody in their teens to people in their 60s, 70s, 80s, and you all have something, a common ground and everything. So, again, it was, I still am trying to process it, and something tells me it's never going to quite click, but it was a real interesting time here.
Well, I can certainly relate. I can tell you once a week I have one of those talking head moments, like, how did I get here? And, and I think about it, you're making a career about, in a world where people are writing stories, fictional stories about heroes and things that can't ever happen in the real world. And yet there's so many people that love this medium that guys like you and I can make a career out of, in our way by being a part of it. And it seems almost unreal, and I literally woke up the other day and I'm like, I don't know how I still have I've been doing this for me, it's like 23 years. Right. And I'm like, I don't know how because it's what I grew up on and I loved. And then now I'm doing this. It doesn't make any sense. But
it's messed up because all of a sudden, you get to work with your peoples you put on a pedestal. I mean, I've had friendships with, and I have friendships with people that as a kid, all of a sudden you get to meet a Will Eisner or a Jack Kirby or I can go down a big list, and all of a sudden they're talking and relating to you like you're on their level. And I never would put myself on. I mean, one time I was at the old other office and Murphy Anderson and his wife just unexpectedly popped in. And, Murphy Anderson, of course, I loved his stuff when I was a kid. I loved that, his clean line and stuff like that. And hearing him and his wife, Helen, come in just to say hi. They were in the area because their daughter was graduating or something like that. And it was like, oh, this is so messed up. This is so not the way it should be. But, of course, you got to kind of act, cool about it and just go, but yeah, it's like I said, I still haven't been able to process that well as far as how could this all work out like this? But it's I got accepted, I think, at some point, and I better start doing it pretty quickly here. Yeah.
Well, clearly you were well respected. I mean, if you're going to have Murphy Anderson just dropping by to say hi because he was in the area, that's wonderful. But I mean, so you've gotten the opportunity to work with a lot of different creators on different projects. I mean, outside of the work that you got to do with Dave Stevens, I mean, what are some of the more memorable experiences that you had with creators?
I really, I'm sure I could find some, but I can't. I didn't write my list in advance. But
I knew I should have sent you a survey before we got started.
Yeah, no. I mean, again, it's hard. I've been fortunate, and some, I've had fluky situations where getting to go up to Bob Kane's apartment and deal with that for a little while. I mean, it's not necessarily a good story, but it's a good story. It's not a happy story and stuff like that. But and then talking and calling up and talking to people like Steve Ditko and him picking the phone. You talk for an hour or something like that, and you walk away going, shit, I just had a conversation with Steve Ditko. I mean, it was funny when in the late 80s, when we did that history of the DC universe and we did the big gatefold with all the artists, there's some fun stories connected with that. And that's when I called up Steve Ditko and had a conversation with him. And during the same time I called up Frank Frazetta, I had a nice conversation with Frank. I almost got him to do the Shining Knight for that. And everything was fine. Then all of a sudden, Ellie got on the phone and kind of said, "Well, what happens to the original?" And I didn't have the right answer for that, so it didn't work out. But if I needed to be sharper on my toes and everything, but it's just like I said, a lot of. I wish I had a better memory. I wish I took better notes. Because I've had the opportunity to be a fly on the wall and also to participate in stuff that it's just all I have now are memories, and they're waning, for lack of a better word. But no, it's been the people I've been able to interact with, both on the professional level and with the fans and the different people. I mean, my wife Gina and I, we have established ourselves at the show as selling T-shirts, because when we're at the shows, we work them. We sell the stuff, and it's really nice to be somewhere and not have people wanting to see you and crawl up your butt and yell at you. I mean, they we try to be nice to them. They're nice to us. They throw their money at us. We take it. So it's a wonderful relationship. But it's the whole community has been very, very good and accommodating and helpful to us. And, they've allowed us to produce stuff that we want to do. I mean, it's a lot of the stuff I do originally was for, hey, I'd like to have this shit. I'd rather have somebody else produce and I'll buy it. But, ended up, I was in the position where I could do certain things and people would buy it, and it worked out good.
Well, that's usually the right way to create new products is if you're a fan and you feel it's something that you need or want, there's bound to be other people that have been looking for something similar. So you have the right approach to that for certain. But yeah, it sounds, honestly, you should start writing a little memoir, Bob, or maybe we should do like a monthly chat, and we try to I give you a month to kind of prepare, and we'll do like different decades of Graphitti Designs and Bob Chapman. And in this decade, you got to do this. I mean, did you get nervous when you had to call up Steve Ditko or Frank Frazetta? I mean, do you get get a little nervous in your stomach before you?
I'm not. I'm not as outgoing as I wish I was more of the appropriate personality to do this. But yeah, I mean, I still remember writing the first letter I wrote with regards to doing something was to Will Eisner. And then at that time, I started writing. You had to write a letter. It wasn't email. It wasn't anything like that. And I realized, shit, I'm in my mid-20s and I've never written a letter to anybody. Then you have to hearken back to your high school and grade school and go, how are you supposed to write a letter? Beginning, middle, end, or, so I had to write my first letter to Will Eisner and try to convince somebody who's smarter than the average bear and has been in the business since the early 40s Hey, I'm somebody you don't know, and I've never done this before, but I'd like to do a Spirit t-shirt. And, I do not know why, but he replied, said yes, and, actually helped me construct my first contract. He had a little 2-page agreement. Since he's such a solid businessman, he said, you have a contract. And of course I go, no, but so he writes one up. But, it was very sweet. And Will was very good to me over the years. He let us do a shirt. We did an action figure years ago, and things like that. And it's just I'm just amazed that people gave me the latitude to be able to do things. And and then it put the responsibility on my shoulders to, I can't screw up on this one, can I? I gotta, it was a real good pressure that I put on myself. But yeah, no, I'm not, talking on phone is a little more comfortable to me than talking in person. So so I remember when I did do some presentations, and those were like, I don't do well with the script. I don't have that, ease of operation in front of people and cameras and stuff. But, you do what you do.
I'm glad I didn't give you a list of questions before we did this panel.
If I don't have to write it down, I'm good. If it comes out of my head, it can be dangerous, and who knows what I'm saying. But we'll take our chances here.
Sure. Well, I have a feeling a lot of people who are in the chat right now, or who are going to watch the show later, have had and worn Graphitti Designs t-shirts over the years. I saw Matt, and number one Marvel fan, had mentioned that Matt had a question. He said, was that first shirt for the 81 San Diego Comic-Con book design with Sheena and the chimp in a tree? Is that the Dave Stevens piece?
That's the Dave Stevens piece, yes. Yeah.
Okay, there you go.
Fortunately, he was talented, and that made it. If that could have ended my whole career right there. If all of a sudden they wouldn't do a shirt with somebody that, again, Dave is magical on so many levels, and being able to do that and be there and continue the relationship is pretty cool. Yeah.
Yeah. No. Well, the documentary on Dave was fantastic. Of course, that came out a couple of years ago. I never got to meet him, I didn't go to my first San Diego Con until '99, maybe, or maybe even 2000, around there. So I never got that chance. But so many of the collectors that I'm good friends with today got to spend a lot of time with them because they're West Coasters and whatnot. And it sounds like you got that wonderful opportunity as well.
Yeah, no, he was very important towards the existence of Graphitti Designs. When you have an influencer like that, and you have somebody that, I learned a lot from him, because he really knew his shit. He really knew composition. He knew, so he was my unofficial art director at the very beginning, and because he was there, I could always, bounce things off of him. And what more could you ask for? You know what I mean? It's not like, it was, his talents were incredible. And again, we had a good relationship, a good friendship, went to a lot of different places together. But, he was again, good guy and talented.
Yeah. And he was very, very gifted. And there's certainly not enough of his work out there, that's on comic art fans. It's career cut way too short, and we're definitely the lesser for it, because I admired his work since, from the first books I've read, especially the Rocketeer stuff really left a big impression on me. But he was so talented in pretty much every project that he worked on.
Yeah, no, he was, again, special and talented. His talents are just, productive? No, he wasn't overly productive, but you can get away with that when you're good.
When you're good, right? Exactly. Well, hey, I see a gentleman in the green room, so maybe we should start talking about the kind of what got us started talking about doing a panel in the first place. And I did I this on camera. I think you got to see that, but I want to show it off one more time, because this is big. I've I've seen a few artist editions in my time. This really is a gallery edition. This isn't just this is big. I didn't know what it was when it came in the mail. It was so heavy. Even my wife got it from the postman, and she's like, "What did you order?" But this thing it's amazing. It's beautiful. And one of the things I was curious about was when did you start the project? Because I know this was something that you've worked on for, I don't want to say quite some time, but I know it's been percolating for a while.
Yeah, with these books, let's say 10 years, but that's not really 10 years. A lot of these books, they're based upon whether you can gain access to the scans. I mean, these scans don't magically appear. We don't know where they are. And so this was always on our list. And what I've been doing for the last 10 years is whenever I have the opportunity to scan artwork, I won't just scan what we're specifically doing a book for. I scan, anything that's surfacing at the moment, because it's just a lot of this stuff doesn't appear that often. And I'll scan it if I have the opportunity, whether I use it or not. Mm-hmm. I want to say almost isn't important. It's more just archiving it somehow. So, started gathering scans probably in 2014 because it was on my list from the very beginning with DC. I had a handful of books that I wanted to do, handful of books that I thought I could do. And a lot of it is also based on that. I didn't tell DC anything that I didn't think we could do. We could, I'm not saying we could gather all the artwork for Killing Joke or all the artwork for Dark Knight or something, but I knew just from putting my feelers out that, we could gather enough to put together a book that would be a comprehensive presentation of the material. And Killing Joke ran into that. And yeah, it's not just Killing Joke's 46 pages. So that's a little few pages for a book. And of course, there's all of other Brian's material. And fortunately, he's not overly prolific. But, looking at that book, you would think, shit, and that's only 20 years of his life because he hasn't produced artwork on board since the late 90s. So this only represents 20 years of his work. And he has another 20, 25 years of what he's done digitally, which, it's a whole nother thing. Very true. Like I said, we were gathering the art, and it grew, because again, we're at the mercy of the collectors and fans and our ability to locate these people. And I changed the book map 3 or 4 times, probably in the last few months, because all of a sudden new pieces started popping up. And rather than say, oh, no, this book is we capped it at 220 pages. No, it's like, no, just keep it coming. And, there was a flurry of artwork towards the end when it became apparent that this book was going to produce. A lot of this art doesn't surface. The collectors kind of go, I'm not going to, take the time to get you a scan if you're not going to do anything with it. So when it became known that it was going to happen, more artwork started appearing. So it's like, double-edged sword. But, and again, but I wasn't going to say no. Joseph and me's talked about this a lot. And when is the drop dead date? Oh, the drop dead date is maybe just a few hours before it goes to press. It's but again, the book map was changed. I could show you book maps that are, I think,
a long time to work on a project, and it would have to evolve based on the material you got. Because when I was going through it, I did see a piece that a friend of mine has, and he had closed his calf gallery like 5 years ago, and I'm like, and I even took a picture of it and I sent it to him. I'm like, hey, look, this cover, do you still own it? I was curious, and he's like, yeah, and so I said, when did they ask you for a scan? Just out of curiosity. He goes, I think it was like 10 years ago. And I'm like, well, now you should be happy. It's seen print. It's right there, and he still had it. So that was cool. But yeah, you mentioned Joseph, and we got a couple of gentlemen in the green room here. So I want to bring both Chris Kalacki and Joseph Melchior in here.
Hi, Chris. Hi, Joseph.
But hey, Chris and Joseph, nice to see you both.
Bob, fancy meeting you here.
Yeah. Hey, wherever and whenever. Yes. How you guys doing?
Good. How are you guys?
Good.
Hey, it's just a beautiful, very hot day here in Central Florida. So Joseph looks like he's someplace cold. He should be
Yeah,
having
France is
a
not hot and sunny. I will tell you that much.
Well, yeah, we did a little, we didn't get to talk about the dead dog parties, but I know Joseph has gone to some of those. So maybe, at least in the past, but we kind of moved over to talking about the book because, I saw both of you guys get here. So, I know Chris obviously knows a bit about publishing, and Joseph, you know a bit about Brian. So I guess, Joseph, to you first. I mean, when Bob kind of first started talking about the project, I mean, what was your involvement 10 years ago, maybe, when this thing was kind of just being, starting its evolution?
I think Killing Joke was actually one of the first things we talked about when Bob first kind of brought it up and was sort of saying, well, what's the likelihood of being able to find, most of the Killing Joke book? And it was, I'm sure Bob has mentioned that the pages were scattered far and wide. It was going to be a bit of a job. And I felt like it was always going to be something that took a while. I don't think I appreciated that it might take a decade, but and I don't know, has Bob actually mentioned that our first contact was sort of through a Killing Joke page, which in fact
we
binds
literally
three of the people on the screen together. Bob used to own a Killing Joke page, which I then pried out of him, and which now resides in the collection of Mr. Kalaki.
Okay.
Long, strange trip.
Yeah. I'm talking to like collecting royalty here. Obviously, I've admired, Chris and Joseph. You guys have been at it for a very long time, and you have no stinkers in your collection, or maybe you just choose not to show those pieces. But I mean, everything's top shelf. So I've always long admired your taste in art, even though it's a little it's not X-Men, it's not Thor, but you really have impressed upon me in many ways. That just the appreciation for those works. Because with Brian's stuff, I've always loved his work, but I over the last 20 years of being an art collector, I have such a greater understanding for how talented that man is, the ability to make such finely detailed pieces like that. It's a talent that not a lot of creators, well, you can't say they can't do it, but take the time to do that in the narrative arts and comics, right? And I think that's one of the reasons why Brian is such a special artist, because of the attention to detail that he puts into his work.
And that's why I think the format and what Bob and Joseph chose to do and pursue is perfect for Brian, because when you enlarge art to that scale, it's very revealing, right, for the artist. So you're going to get a deep sense of how much effort and time in every nook and cranny, or it's not that they're mailing it in, but are they on more of a production rush, whatever it may be. So I have a brother who's an artist, and got him one of the books in San Diego, and he got delivered in like 24 hours. He called me. He's like, oh my gosh. He's like, I knew that Brian Bolland was talented. He's like, I didn't know that he was that talented. He's like, some of the detail that you don't see in the comic, or even in kind of other things that you might see imagery like on CAF or whatever, the book just absolutely explodes some of that detail. He gave one example of the scene where Batman and the Joker are in prison, and they're underneath that light. Like, my brother's mind was blown with the stippling of the inking in the light. Like, his question was like, who spends that much time? He's like, do you understand the fineness of the brushwork on just this lighting detail? He's like, so his mind was blown, and he has a much more of an artist eye than I do. But I would say overall for Bob and for Joseph, it just speaks volumes about how important that format and that scale and the size of the art is to really kind of make sure that people do understand, Bill, to your point, what a unique talent Brian is. Just what a unique talent he is.
Yeah, I don't think whenever you look at his work, you the last thing you think of is that he ever took a shortcut on anything. Which
even one of the comments I've had on this book is people look at it and it's too clean, and it doesn't use the format the way it should. because you don't see any pimples and warts, because Brian doesn't draw. I mean, he draws them, and if he drew them, they'd be eloquent. But there's no whiteout. There's no. I mean, even when Brian uses whiteout, he uses it with the same precision that he uses his brush. And it's just they're not dirty pages. I mean, they're not. You compare it to a Dark Knight page, and Dark Knight page you have not just paper coloration differences, but you also have all this whiteout, which I like. I like the character, that a nice blue line, or you see something. And in Brian's, you're this far away from just looking at it, just a black and white stat. You really are. And I know I'm talking down the book, but I'm not, because like you were saying, Chris, it does show Brian's control and skill of and his anal retentiveness in a good way. I mean, it's just like, how can he do this? And he does. But yeah, he's very incredible, and we're very fortunate we had the opportunity to produce this book, because it's likely there will never be a gathering of Brian's artwork like this again, and to be able to do it is an honor.
Well, there's an editor I spoke to who used to own the Wonder Woman. It's the color Wonder Woman cover to Amazing Heroes, which is in the book. And she used to have it hanging in her office. And apparently one of the creators she worked with would quite often come and stand in her office for long periods of time staring at the picture. And she assumed he really liked it. And one day he kind of let out a yelp, apparently. And he said, "I've been looking at this piece, trying to find something wrong with it." He said, "I can't believe that this color piece doesn't have anything. And I finally found a speck out of place, and I feel better about my life that Brian Bolland made a mistake and I found it." But it was literally a speck.
Yeah.
So.
And knowing Brian is something he maybe did intentionally, because he knows that nothing in life is perfect, so he put it there intentionally.
Well, all of that, is why when he made the not to talk about it, the transition to digital, but that's why it was so seamless, because his work was so perfect already. It's literally the same. His digital work looks just like his traditional work, because he's so clean and precise on everything. And if anybody made that transition, a lot of other creators, you would notice it, but with Brian's work, you don't. It's as good as it was when he was working traditional. So, I mean, I can't think of another creator that that could possibly do that and still maintain the same level of quality.
It was funny. A few weeks ago, I was at a show called the Lightbox Expo here in Pasadena, and it was not a comic book audience. It was artists and designers, most of them young, most of them very young, in their 20s and 30s, working in the animation field, working just on a whole different level. And I had the book there, and many of them looked at it, and their cutest comment was they were looking at it and they go, "What are these things?" And they were saying these are registration marks. So they didn't know what those things. They were in such a digital state of mind. And then they were also going, how was this done? And I said, this represents the way the original artwork looks and everything. And they really were concerned. How can somebody draw like this without having the safety net of being able to erase it and go back a few steps? And I had never thought about that because, again, the generational difference, but they couldn't understand how somebody, and I was trying to convey to them that, with like anything else, whether you play a guitar or you draw, with practice, you theoretically gain a confidence. And Brian's line art, that's not just confidence. That's he just, but it was really interesting to be challenged by somebody in their 20s going, how can you do this stuff? Because they don't understand it. You make a mistake, you do use whiteout, but somebody like Brian is such a master of all the mediums, for lack of a better word, whether it's color, black and ink work. And like I said, even his whiteout, you don't even, most artists put whiteout on something and it's been put there. Brian feathers his whiteout or so. He does something so it looks like it's not whiteout, but it was a really cool observation to get from a younger non-comic book audience. And it just made me think, which, why make me think, but it was very challenging for a moment, but then I came up with a good answer and it worked out fine.
Well, I mean, you just look at his pencil prelims and realize how, even there, I mean, those are wonderful finished pieces. I mean, not many people can have a really large aftermarket for cover prelims, but Brian Bolland's one of the few, right? I mean, but they're just, that's because they're amazing. They're finished pieces of art. They're just not inked. Yeah. I mean, he never cut corners, which is what I think we all really appreciate about him. But I wanted to highlight, let's see, and you know what, I'm going to move you to the top, Joseph, a place of distinction. How's that? That way, if I highlight a comment, it'll go over my mug and not yours. But what do we got here? Antoine wanted to say that in the 90s, there was a con dealer who had portfolios of Brian's covers and whatnot, and seeing those originals changed his life. I mean, portfolios back, those sorts of things back in the day were like people's gateway to collecting OA. But I can see why something like that would leave a lasting impact, because those would be larger and they're not looking at a comic book. I mean, I picked up a few in the 80s. I mean, I'm just kind of curious with you guys. Is that something? Was that a starting point for you, or did you just skip over that era and just go right to the art?
So what was that? Collecting portfolios?
Yeah, well, like a set of plates or something that would be put together, because that kind of stuff was big in the 80s. Speaking
for myself, I mean, I definitely did collect portfolios. I remember collecting the Marshall Rogers Batman ones and ones that I really liked. I don't know that it scratched the original art itch in any way. It was almost like an extension of comics to me, more frameable. But I don't know that I ever linked it with original art in my head, for me personally, anyway.
Yeah, I had the Cerebus limited portfolio, the Washington portfolios, a couple of other ones along those lines. But that, oddly enough, Bill, it's a great question, because that wasn't what linked the art to me. It was actually, I remember being in a comic store in college, and I collected comics all the way from being a kid. This was like the freshman year of college. And the guy had a con sketch from Matt Wagner. And I was like, it was Batman Grendel. The book hadn't come out as of yet. And it was just up on a wall. He had been to the con and he was selling it. And I was like, I'm totally confused. And it was like the whole concept of being able to connect with the artist of a book. That was where it kind of happened for me. And that was a bad connection, because it's been all downhill ever since. But yeah. As you can tell from Joseph is my favorite drug dealer, is how I refer to him.
He's created a lot of habits. Yes, he's
no doubt about it. Yeah.
Just remember, the first taste is free.
Yeah, no, you're right. It becomes very expensive after that.
Sure. First taste.
I did misread Antoine's comment a little bit, but either way, one thing we should mention, because we kind of came into the book project midway, is that in the description for the show, there is a link to go buy a copy of the book off of Graffiti Press, Bob. So I wanted to make sure everybody knew that. I read a few people, like Bob McCann, said in the chat that the quality of the book is incredible. And it's true. The breadth of work that's in there is more than what you could have ever expected. If you're going into it just thinking it was going to be Killing Joke artwork, you're going to be, really pleased, because it really does, like Bob said, covers 20 years of Brian's work. I mean, you get to see some 2000 AD all the way through his Wonder Woman covers. I mean, you name it. There's Animal Man covers in there, everything. And it's very special. But I would encourage anybody to pick it up.
That's why we tweaked the title. I mean, people are chastising us, saying, how come you have such a wordy title? It was like, originally I wanted it out there as, Brian Bolland, The Killing Joke. And then all of a sudden people would come up and go, they didn't recognize that I was using Killing Joke as a gateway to all this other artwork. And at some point it's like, shit, how do we define it? We don't want to give it a cute title and just say the works of Brian Bolland, so we took, the title is definitely wordy and is improper in many ways, but we felt like we needed to, capture what was inside the book. And, again, Killing Joke is only 26 pages. You put in the pencil preliminaries and the covers, and you still don't have enough for a book. And also it didn't represent Brian's artwork. I mean, the goal with this from the beginning was how can we best represent Brian's artwork and do this definitive presentation of his DC material. And, but again, how do you put that in the title of a book?
Well, I did suggest Brian's DC stuff, and Bob shot me down. So.
DC stuff. Well, it's presented so well. You've got the overlays in there with characters printed on those. There's some fold outs. I mean, it's just really well represented in a way that makes it feel like I'm looking at traditional works. I mean, because everybody in the chat and all of us here, have handled a lot of originals in our time. And that's really, one of the things I appreciated a lot about that was when I got into like the cover section, I just felt like it was so fun being able to lay the almost a vellum overlay on it and then pull it back and flip back. It was, it was really presenting it in the way in which Brian drew it. And that's so unique. And it's an experience that most of us don't get to have unless you get to handle the originals. And Brian's stuff is in collections that many of us outside of Joseph will never get to see. And so this is as close as we're going to get. And I think that's special though, because it really gives you insight into Brian's thinking as it relates to print and his design sense and just how comics are put together. I mean, as collectors, I think by and large, everybody really enjoys what, the process that goes into the artwork. And I think from what we've already talked about with Brian's stuff, it's hard to tell what the process is. That poor guy who kept looking at the artwork, looking for a blemish, you can't find one. So this is as good as it's going to get without sitting down across from Brian and doing an interview with him about it to try to get a little insight into his creative process. I think with the book, Bob, you've done a fantastic job.
Well, thank you. And it was nice to be able to, on those first few pages of Killing Jokes, present in the two formats. I didn't even know there were two different format sizes until all of a sudden I started getting two scans of the same page. And then, of course, that, it forced me to ask Joseph questions as far as, well, what the hell was Brian doing back then? And so this book has there's a lot of, I got immersed in it, for lack of a better word. And Joseph was, this book could not have happened without Joseph, steering me in the direction of who had the artwork and stuff. And he also answered a lot of questions, as did Brian, because there's a lot of things that went on in this book. A lot of things are happening with formats in comics during this period, and coloring in comics and production in general. And Killing Joke definitely reflects this, as far as the differential in page sizes and, no numbers in the corners and the blue line coloring. This is stuff where, DC was going, again, they were in the process of changing format, changing printers, changing papers, doing all this stuff. And the more you immerse yourself in the artwork, you can read between the lines, and there's a whole nother story there. And it's kind of fun. I mean, even, you're talking about the cleanliness of Brian, him taking the one format of art and putting it to another, even that is way cleaner than it should be, considering, he made stats and then extended the artwork and did different things to make it work with the different ratio and stuff like that. So
have you discussed the format change, that it was originally a graphic novel and then switched to prestige format?
We did not.
No.
Bob?
Joseph, you asked the question.
I'd have to. I thought about scanning some of those pages and I didn't. But why don't you talk about it, Joseph? Because initially it threw me. I didn't read like the forward at first. I wanted to dive right in, and I'm looking at it. And I'm like, why? What am I looking at here? So because it has two different versions of the same page on a spread.
Yeah. So the story goes that when Brian and Alan Moore first started working on Killing Joke, I think it had been envisaged as a graphic novel format, which DC at that time were doing kind of original graphic novels, and Killing Joke was going to be one of them. And I think at some point there was Batman Dark Knight Returns had come out, and the prestige format was the new format, and someone made the decision to publish Killing Joke in that format. But the ratios in terms of the way the pages were drawn, Brian was already set, I believe 6 or 7 pages into it, and then switched, but the ratios had to change, which meant that, as Bob mentioned, he statted the pages and then changed the ratios by extending the panels. So you've got the original 6 or 7 pages that were drawn in the graphic novel sized board, and then switched over into the Killing Joke pages, which I believe were about 13 by 19 inches, and required each panel to be extended a bit. So that means that for the first 6 or 7 pages, you actually have 2 versions of each page. Okay. So even though what people are familiar with is the published page, it was shot off of a page that was largely stat, but then extended by Brian. And so in the book, we've tried to present both of those pages where possible. So that was something that I don't think up until the book came out, a lot of people weren't aware of.
Now, there's a lot of fun facts on Killing Joke, and that's the primary one. But just even how the book was lettered. I think Richard Starking's lettered on crack and peel stuff for the first 14 or so pages. And then at some point, Brian said, "Why am I doing all this artwork if you're going to cover it with a word balloon?" And so at that point, Brian and Richard collaborated more because fortunately they were in the same locale. And so I'm sure Richard was on Brian's doorstep at all hours of the day and night. And Brian was comfortable with it because he didn't want to draw stuff that wasn't going to be used. But, it would have, like I said, look at the first, I think, 14 pages of Killing Joke, and you'll see a little translucent nature to the word balloons. And that's because, again, the word balloons were set on top of artwork that we'll never see. It's gone forever. But, there's a lot of things like that. Like I said, a lot of it was, even the cover that we could not locate the cover to Killing Joke. I mean, nobody ever saw it in the lifetime. So it's not like it hasn't appeared in the last 10 years. It hasn't appeared in the last 35 years. I mean, nobody has any recollection or anything of where it is. But we were fortunate enough to find the next best thing, which is a production black line that DC used to produce in those days. So it was shot from the original art. It's the same size as the original art. It has all the bleed and everything to it. And we found one of those. And that's
I believe it actually shows slightly more art than the actual printed cover, which is, again,
it does, because it has the bleed. So you have theoretically a quarter of an inch on the fly side and the 2 tops. And so you have a little bit more of the artwork that has never been seen before, or wasn't seen in any of the printed versions. And, because that's what's nice about these books also, is you get to see the artwork before it's not stuff that's covers, especially, with any original art cover, you see how it's marked that this is the live area, the print area, but then there's also extended area because, printing isn't that fine of a science. And so there's a little slop that's traditionally built into printing. But yeah, so on the cover, we are very fortunate to be able to find the black line. Again, if the artwork ever appears, it would be great to. I'd be surprised, like I said, because Joseph and I and Brian and people who should know didn't know, and nobody had a clue where it might be. But it's got to be somewhere, theoretically. But
yeah, you would think they want it to be a part of the book. I mean, if it's out there, a collector can remain anonymous and want to see the book kind of put together properly. I would think anyone who owned it, if you were able to have gotten in touch with them, would have given you a proper scan of it, because it's just, it's just what we would want to see as a collector.
There are collectors that are out of the loop. There are a lot of collectors out there that Joseph and I, Joseph's aware of them, or people are aware of them, but there are collectors out there that are off the radar completely. And, and it has to be amazing what some of these people might have, or what some of these people don't even know that they have. But, since there's, you have CAF, which is a great registry for original art, but it represents just a very small percentage of the artwork that's actually in the hands of collectors and stuff. And it's just, and there's a degree of anonymity that a lot of these collectors have, for good reasons. I mean, of course, it's nice to be proud of your collection and want to show it to everybody, but you better have security guards nowadays outside of your house. And, there's reasons. And also some of these people are professionals and are very busy people. And their collecting of artwork isn't the focus of their life. And they don't necessarily have the time to deal with some of the repercussions of owning original art, But, it's a whole interesting story in itself that, you need to do an episode on one of these days, as far as the trials and tribulations of the original art collector. It's
in regard to the cover, we did chase down some leads, some of which were incredibly random. One of the stories was that the band Killing Joke had done a deal with DC over infringement of the name, and part of the settlement was that one of the band members got the cover. And it was kind of like, well, it's a random story, but who knows? And, we chased down a number of leads like this that ultimately led nowhere, but it did feel like, well, we're leaving no stone unturned trying to find this cover.
Right. Well, that's part of the chase that we collectors have grown to appreciate and get. It keeps the hobby interesting, because you just never know what's going to surface. Heritage, for instance, always has like one thing that you weren't expecting, right? It is what keeps things fun. And I don't know. I enjoy seeing an obscure piece end up on CAF that I wasn't expecting to see. Chris drops them regularly, like those Miracle Man pages he recently posted. So, but I hate to do this, guys, but we're right up against the end of my panel time slot here, because we have another panel coming up. But clearly, one the things we want to make sure everybody knows about is you can buy the book by clicking the link in the description. But Bob, I think what we've learned from talking to you, before I brought Chris and Joseph on, is that we either need to get you to write a memoir, or we need to have you come on like every other month, and we'll talk about your career and the creators and collectors that you've gotten to interact with over the last almost 50 years, because there's stories there that need to be told. So and I'd be happy to be your sounding board to get those stories out there.
If you have the ability to extract them from me one way or the other, you're welcome to try. I'd be more than happy to.
I'm up for the challenge.
Yeah, it's more of a you better be careful with what you say here, But no, I'd love to share some of it, as long as I don't bore people to tears and shit. But it's there's all of us have good stories. It's a very interesting business we're involved in, and Joseph and I constantly talk about the challenges of dealing with not just the artist, but the collector community. It keeps us on our toes.
Yes, exactly.
I'm trying to be nice here, Joseph. I may need some legal counseling here at some point. But,
Maybe we don't want to have Bob on every other month. We'll have to do a private recorded interview that I might have to edit segments in and out of it. I don't know, right?
Edit heavily, yes.
Well, before we leave it, the good news is at least I hope, is that I'll see the three of you at OAX in January as well. I'm pretty confident that I will. Yeah. And now everybody knows you all a little bit better. So if people in the chat or who watch this later are going to OAX.
Bob said he's getting the first round in.
Ah, very good. All right. Well,
I forgot. Can you replay that for me?
Well, if it's Friday night, it's an open bar, so you can feel like you're buying all the drinks for everybody, Bob, but you don't have to. I'll be buying them.
Okay.
But,
Okay. I like that. I like that.
But thank you all for doing this. I know you know, Joseph, you're at a show. Chris, you probably got better things to do on a Saturday afternoon, and Bob, you as well. But I really enjoyed getting to hang out with you guys for this panel, and I look forward to getting to see you both, all three of you again in less than 3 months. So
3 months.
thank you. And have a wonderful afternoon. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. And there'll be another panel that you'll get redirected to after this one is over. So thanks again.
Thanks, Bill.
Thank
Take care.
you,
Thanks, guys. Thanks.
Okay.